let's have a talk about Chainsaw Man. Specifically, Chainsaw Man Part 2. Now, I've seen a lot of various views on Chainsaw Man Part 2. People love it, people hate it, and I wanted to give my more nuanced opinion on it. I'm going to flat out say that I definitely think Part 2 is worse than Part 1. I think Part 1 was amazing compared to Part 2, which is pretty okay. It's decent. It definitely has its highlights, but I think overall it is weaker, and I will give you that. I also think its pacing, specifically I think its pacing is off. I think its characters are worse. However, I do think as a whole, Chainsaw Man Part 2 is still good. I still would recommend it. I would not recommend stopping at Part 1. I would recommend continuing, and I definitely think that someone who has the displeasure of reading it bi-weekly and just kind of got lost should probably try to reread it in a straightforward fashion to just give it a chance and see if the more coherent storytelling of the back-to-back chapters, which is what I experienced, benefit you better. Because I definitely think that part of the pacing issue would probably be experiencing these much slower-paced stories over the course of multiple weeks compared to how most people experienced Part 1, which was just reading it front to back. And that is the disadvantage of the manga release system compared to, like, novels here in the West. And in the East, I suppose. Novels in general. So I want to highlight some of the things that I think are good about Chainsaw Man Part 2. I think Asa Yoru is a very interesting main character. I definitely think she has her problems. I think her being taken away from the spotlight for Denji to be reintroduced was a mistake. I think she should have still held just as much importance instead of just having back-to-back chapters where she's not even mentioned. I think the whole bit of her constantly falling over is really overplayed and way more annoying than any bit in Chainsaw Man Part 1. And I think that overall, her character just needs more time in the spotlight. She's literally the main character. She should have more time in the spotlight. But at the same time, I still like her. I think she's a very compelling main character. She's compelling for a very different reason to Denji, and I'm definitely hoping that her and Denji, whether through a romantic relationship or otherwise, continue as the two main characters, as I think their dynamic, once everything kind of settles down, will be very interesting. However, I will once again play to those who dislike this part by saying most of the other characters in Part 2 that were introduced in Part 2 are pretty weak. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember most of their names. You have, like, Male Kobeni. I don't know if he's meant to be her brother or not, but yeah, Male Kobeni, he's certainly a character. You have the school shooter girl from the first or second arc of Part 2. I don't really know what the point of her was. I mean, I know what the point of her was, but I didn't really find her compelling at all. And then there's Kishibe's replacement, who I don't remember the name of. He's not a new character, he's technically a returning character, but I found him insufferable compared to Kishibe. I know he's technically different to Kishibe, because Kishibe actually cared about Denji, whereas he doesn't, but at the end of the day, I still don't like him. You can be a bad person and be a good character. I don't think he's a good character. I think he's annoying. And I will give you all of those critiques, but I still think Part 2 is good. I'm just highlighting things I don't like. I think, personally, the Church of Chainsaw Man arc really was kind of hard to read, but I do think that is partially because I binge read it in the morning, like, I'm talking like literally 3 a.m., so it's not really the best constitution of quality, in the same way that reading it bi-weekly or weekly or whatever would not be the best experience. I don't think either of us, in that case, have experienced it the correct way. Yeah, so, sorry that I've been rambling. I don't know if this makes any sense. I'm just It really astonishes me how polarizing this part is, and I want to see if I can open up some genuine discussion over the quality of this part. I want to see the people who love it, the people who hate it, and I want more nuanced conversation than, nah, it's mid, or nah, it's amazing, because those don't say anything. And even when people break down their qualms or praises, a lot of the time they don't elaborate. They'll say, oh, the pacing's bad, but they won't give you examples. Or, they'll say the characters are bad, but they won't give you examples. Not that I disagree necessarily, it's just I want to open up a more nuanced, more developed conversation. I really like Part 2, and nothing that anyone outside of the manga itself will change that. If I personally feel the manga takes a nosedive, then I will stop reading it. But personally, I think it is really good still. I don't think it's as good as Part 1, but I enjoy it. And more importantly than enjoying the individual chapters, I enjoy where the story is going. And that is, I think, my final point I will try to make, is that I'm in it for the long run. I think that Part 2 will be remembered. Now, you can quote me on this in the future and say that I completely got everything wrong, and that it fell off and it got canceled or whatever. But in the current moment, I think Part 2 will be the thing that right now people don't like. But fast forward into the future, and all of a sudden, a lot more people are a lot more okay with Part 2. Because Part 2 was the building blocks needed to push the story further. I hope that was what happens. I have faith in Fujimoto that that is what will happen. And if it doesn't, you can clown me, you can make fun of me, whatever. But I just hope that we can get some good conversation. Because outside of the literal Chainsaw Man subreddit, I don't think I've seen any nuanced opinions on Part 2. And even then, that's stretching it a little bit. So, have a good night. Let's talk.
Things I forgot: the positives. Lol. The Falling Devil was cool AF. The Aquarium arc was neat. Fami and Barum are cool. The Justice Devil arc / Girl arc was pretty good. Story direction is great. After 169 possible shift focus back to ASA, or at least soon.